Let's talk about the one thing that nobody wants to admit out loud. Sales hates your leads. And maybe they don't say it exactly like that. Like maybe it comes out more like these aren't real buyers or we're not getting anything good from marketing. Underneath any of those statements is the same message. Sales doesn't trust marketing. And when that happens, marketing loses credibility, not just with sales, but with leadership too. And so today we're going to unpack why this happens, what's actually broken behind the scenes, and how you can start to rebuild trust so that marketing and sales are finally working together as one revenue team. This is Spark Sessions, the podcast designed to help B2B marketers stop reacting and start leading. I am your host, Lori Tyler. And after more than 25 years in B2B marketing, both inside of global organizations and now as a fractional CMO, I've seen what makes marketing respected as a growth driver. But I've also seen what causes marketing to just get written off as a lead factory. So today, we are going to dig real deep into all that. And if you're watching this on my YouTube channel, you can see I am rocking a ponytail today because I feel like it's casual day today. It feels like this is going to be one of those roll up your sleeves kind of sessions. So I want to get into it. And I wanted to start off by telling you a story that I think just perfectly explains how marketing and sales kind of end up on opposite sides of this conversation. So, a couple of years ago, I was consulting with a company, and the CEO pulled me aside after one of the leadership meetings, and he said, um, sales says marketing leads are worthless. Marketing says they're crushing it. I don't know who to believe. And so I sat down with both teams, and marketing showed me their dashboard, and it was full of form fills and webinar registrants and content downloads. And the numbers were huge. And, they had a bunch of charts, and all the charts were going up and to the right. And they felt very proud of the work that they were doing. And honestly, they should have been. They were super busy. They were launching campaigns constantly. And then I talked to sales, and sales showed me their pipeline, and they showed me the deals that they were actually working. And they said, you know, none of these people in the pipeline are coming from marketing. And both teams, of course, thought that they were right. And the truth is, they were both right. Marketing was generating activity and sales was trying to close revenue, but nobody had ever defined or connected the dots into how that activity actually becomes revenue. There was no shared definition of what a good lead looks like. There was no agreement on what happens after a lead comes in. There were no expectations for follow up. There was no clarity on ownership. So everybody just kind of, you know, defaulted to feeling frustrated. Marketing felt unappreciated, and sales felt overwhelmed and not supported. And leadership felt stuck in the middle. So here's the big mindset shift that I want you to make. It's that sales doesn't actually hate your leads. Sales hates uncertainty. They don't know where the leads are coming from that get passed over to them. They don't know why a person raised their hand and maybe asked for follow up. They don't know if the person even fits your ideal customer profile. And they don't know what they're supposed to even do with the marketing leads. And when things feel unclear, people protect their time. And for sales, Protecting their time often looks like ignoring marketing altogether. Your job is not to convince sales that marketing is valuable. Your job is to remove the ambiguity from the system. And the first place to start is by getting really honest about whether your organization can clearly explain what a qualified lead even is. So if you ask 5 people what an MQL means and you get 5 different answers, that means you don't have alignment. You just have a bunch of noise. And so from there, we just want to start simple. Sit down with sales leadership and say, let's define what a good lead looks like in plain language. Not one of those 20-slide persona decks like we like to create, in plain English. Talk about, who is this person? What type of company do they work for? What problems are they trying to solve? What behavior of theirs signals real intent? And once you have that, everything will get kind of easier. The next shift is moving away from obsessing over volume and really focusing on fit. A small number of right fit leads are going to outperform your massive pile of random ones. And, marketing often gets rewarded for how many leads they generate. Well, sales gets rewarded for how much revenue they close. And if those two things aren't connected, then obviously you are setting yourself up, or someone is setting you and your organization up for conflict. So once you open the conversation with sales leadership, then you need to work together to put it in writing. And for me, that always means a sales and marketing service level agreement, or an SLA. And this is simply a documented agreement that says, here's what marketing commits to deliver, and here's what sales commits to do in return. It spells out what a lead is that's marketing qualified, what criteria sales is going to use in order to either accept or reject that lead. It's going to outline how quickly sales will commit to follow up on the lead, what's going to happen once the lead is accepted, what happens when it's rejected, and how both teams are going to measure success. It is not a scary, legally binding document. It is just an operating agreement. And it's going to help you remove all of the emotion out of these types of conversations. Because instead of saying, sales never follows up, you can say, our agreement says that within 24 business hours, sales will follow up on marketing qualified leads. And right now we're averaging 3 days. Let's fix that. And for sales, instead of saying, marketing sends junk over, they can say, these leads don't match the criteria that we agreed on. Let's tighten it. And, those are very valid conversations that you should be having. And now the expectations are visible once you have the SLA in place. And that visibility creates accountability on both sides. And now you're solving problems together instead of pointing fingers and blaming each other. And, another huge piece of rebuilding trust is improving the handoff. Like, most lead handoffs look like, somebody fills out a form, the lead drops into the CRM, sales gets an alert, and that's it. They're supposed to be picked up. They're supposed to work it. They're supposed to, work that opportunity, convert it to an opportunity until it's closed. From sales's perspective, that handoff actually feels like a mystery box, and you can dramatically improve the experience for them by just adding some context. So, why did this person engage with us? What did they engage with us on? What topic were they interested in? If they landed on a website page, what page were they viewing? What campaign drove them and converted them to be an MQL? Every single sentence of context is going to help make the difference for the salesperson. You can say, this person downloaded the, whatever it was, healthcare compliance guide and visited the pricing page. And those things can be automated within the automated MQL emails that go out to sales. And so, now sales isn't walking in blind, they're walking in informed. And finally, you have to start reporting differently. If you only report on the leads that are being generated, sales is never going to care about that. You want to report on how many of those leads became MQLs and how many of those were accepted by sales. And then how many of those turned into opportunities, how much pipeline was created from those, and how much revenue is attributed to those. And when sales starts to trust marketing leads, the follow up improves and the conversion rates improve and the pipeline improves. But more importantly, marketing stops being seen as a support function and sales will start to view you as a partner, not because you argued your case harder and not because you were begging for credit, but because you really built a system together. And so then the next critical step is you really have to operationalize this inside of your CRM. Because if you just have alignment on the piece of paper, regardless of how important I'm saying the SLA is, and it is critically important, it just doesn't scale. You have to have alignment inside of Salesforce or whatever CRM you're using. And that means that your system has to be set up very clearly so that you can see which campaign generated the lead and when that lead became an MQL and whether or not sales accepted it or rejected it, when it turned into an opportunity, if it did, and how much revenue it ultimately came from it. And in practical terms, that means things like every campaign has to be created in Salesforce. Every lead needs to be tied to a campaign. You have to have standard lead statuses. You have to have clear MQL and sales accepted lead fields within your CRM. The opportunities have to be tied back to the source and the influencing campaign. It's all the plumbing that has to be put in place. And so when that happens, marketing and sales are now looking at the same data. It's inside of the same system. You're using all of the same definitions. So your Salesforce or whatever CRM, it becomes your single source of truth. And it's not based on opinions or anecdotes or, who's louder in the meeting. Data becomes your source of truth. And that's the way it should be. And obviously you cannot do this alone. You should not be doing this alone. You need to pull in your RevOps person or your marketing ops person or your Salesforce administrator. Sit down with all of them and clearly articulate your goals and share your service level agreements and say to them that you need to be able to see inside of Salesforce how campaigns turn into MQLs and how the MQLs turn into sales accepted leads, how those turn into opportunities, how much revenue can be attributed from marketing. And from there, you can work together in order to kind of pressure test your current setup and make sure you're creating a system where all of those things are happening. Make sure that the MQL is a clearly defined field and make sure you have the sales accepted lead stage and make sure you have primary campaign source. Like these are all foundational things. And all of these things can happen and need to live in your CRM. And once that structure is in place, all of your reporting and all of your conversations are going to get so much easier and so much more strategic. The final step in all of it, after you have all of the mechanics set up, is rolling it out and is training, because it's going to end up being an exercise in change management, because no salesperson loves being in Salesforce. It's an administrative task to them. It is a burden to them. Every extra click that they have to make in Salesforce is not something that they're going to love. This needs to come down from their sales management team in partnership with marketing. And it has to be an easy enough, simple enough process that they can absorb, and really learn. And they have to do that through training. So, you know, make sure that you're working with sales leadership to organize and run this joint sales, marketing, and, really sales leadership. And it should be sales leadership led, this training session where you're all in partnership together, talking to the greater sales organization, and that it's covering everything that we just talked about, defining what is an MQL, what is expected to happen when one is created and passed over to sales, and what is sales expected to do, how sales can either accept or reject a lead, and explain why updating the status matters to them as a salesperson, and explain how this data is going to be used in reporting and how it's going to determine budgets and marketing support. And really frame it as a revenue enablement initiative, not as, you don't want to sound like you're coming at it from like a process police perspective. This is not about micromanaging anyone. It's not about, giving anybody more work that isn't a critical function. It's really about building a system that helps everyone see what's working and fix what's not, and to help the whole company grow faster. Because when operations and marketing and sales are all aligned on the same system and the same process and the same why, that's when attribution really starts working. And that's when reporting becomes credible. And that's when trust really starts to rebuild and starts to improve between sales and marketing. So here's your big takeaway: sales doesn't hate marketing, sales just hates chaos. Remove the chaos, and trust will follow. So this week, just start with one simple step. Write down, what does a qualified lead mean for your organization? And that alone is going to help move you forward. I hope you got something out of today's episode. Thank you so much for joining me. If you liked this episode, please consider giving it a review and subscribing to my channel. I'm Lori Tyler, and this has been Spark Sessions.